I sat alone in the restaurant, gently swirling my glass of water, listening to the hushed whispers of the waitstaff as they stole glances in my direction. For the third time that evening, Kevin, the server, approached with a hesitant smile. "Ashley, would you like to order anything else?" I looked up, my gaze sweeping across the other tables, where couples clinked glasses, laughed or whispered sweet nothings to each other. A lump formed in my throat as I looked at the table in front of me. A table for two, but only one chair was in use. "No thank you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "My husband will be here soon." The words rang out like a blatant lie, one that even I didn't believe. I had been sitting there for nearly 3 hours, since 6 p.m., yet Ethan was nowhere to be seen. The last time I checked my phone, there was only one message from him, sent an hour ago. "Stuck in traffic. Don't wait. Don't wait." Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I'll be there soon," just a casual command. As if I were nothing more than an afterthought in his life. I smoothed down the navy blue silk dress I had carefully chosen that morning, remembering how Ethan once said blue made me look a bit more refined. A comment that sounded like a compliment but was really just a lukewarm observation, as if I needed to try harder to meet his standards. The glass of water in front of me was empty, the melted ice leaving faint streaks along the rim. I could leave right now. Anyone with self-respect wouldn't wait this long, but after 12 years of marriage, I had grown used to putting Ethan before myself. Used to waiting for him, adjusting my schedule to fit his, playing the role of the perfect wife whenever he needed. I was about to ask for the check when the restaurant doors swung open, a rush of cold air following as Ethan walked in. He wasn't alone. Beside him were 3 colleagues, Ryan, Jessica, and Paul, all still dressed in business attire, their hair neatly styled, their expressions confident. Not one of them looked like they had just endured a traffic jam. Ethan strode toward my table, his eyes flickering over me with something akin to amusement, no trace of guilt, no sign of remorse. He turned to his coworkers and smirked. "See, I told you she'd still be here. Like a devoted wife." Ryan chuckled, Paul shook his head in amusement, and Jessica covered her mouth with a giggle. Everything froze for a moment. A tightness gripped my chest, each of Ethan's words slicing through my dignity like a blade. No apology, no regretful embrace, just a cruel joke at my expense, right in front of his colleagues. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. A few nearby diners glanced in my direction, their expressions a mix of curiosity and pity. Kevin stood still for a second, his eyes filled with something like concern, but he didn't know how to help. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his smug smile unwavering. "Why didn't you order first?" he asked, as if nothing had happened. I stared at him. A strange feeling stirred within me, something that had been dormant for far too long. Anger, disappointment, and a sudden, undeniable clarity. I no longer wanted to answer him. I no longer wanted to waste another second being the background to Ethan's spectacle. Taking a deep breath, I pushed aside the ache in my chest. I called Kevin over, picked up the menu, and looked Ethan straight in the eye. "I think I'll have a glass of wine," I said, my voice light but loaded with meaning. Ethan raised an eyebrow, puzzled. But I understood. I had waited long enough. I took a slow sip, the slight bitterness of Cabernet spreading across my tongue, but inside I felt nothing at all. Ethan was busy texting in his work chat, barely acknowledging my presence. Across the table the chair was now occupied, but I still felt as if I were alone in a room full of strangers. I set my glass down, my fingers tightening slightly against the fabric of my dress. A part of me wanted to stand up, to say something, to reclaim my dignity. But I knew Ethan would only scoff, would tell me I was too sensitive, like he always did, and the people around us would continue to watch me with quiet sympathy. No, I wouldn't let this end the way he expected. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, as if every movement was calculated. Ethan barely glanced up, uninterested. "Where are you going?" he asked, eyes still fixed on his phone. "I'm going to the restroom," I said, my voice strangely calm. He merely nodded, not even bothering to look at me. I turned and walked past the rows of tables, ignoring the glances from the waitstaff. They knew I had been left waiting for 3 hours. They knew I had been humiliated. And now, they were about to witness something they probably hadn't seen before. The door to the restroom closed behind me, sealing me off from the noise of the restaurant. I leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror, My makeup was still intact, my lipstick only slightly faded, but my eyes looked exhausted beyond belief. I didn't recognize myself anymore. 12 years. 12 years spent devoted to Ethan, sacrificing everything to be the wife he wanted, abandoning my own plans, putting my career on hold, moving from city to city for his job. I had lived for Ethan, for this marriage. And in the end, I was nothing more than a joke. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. Ethan had never paid much attention to our finances. He always assumed I would never touch his money for anything personal. But he forgot one thing. I was the one who managed our credit cards. I tapped on my airline app. A first-class flight, a destination far enough away that I could finally breathe. Rome. I hesitated for a second. I had once dreamed of Rome when I was younger. When I was still a girl full of ambition and passion for culture, art, and Italian cuisine. I had wanted to walk along its ancient cobblestone streets, to taste food crafted by true artisans. But I had put that dream aside to follow Ethan to the cities he wanted. Not this time. I booked the earliest flight, 11 p.m., just over 3 hours away. I entered Ethan's credit card details, paused for a brief moment before hitting confirm. Then, I took a deep breath and pressed my finger to the screen. Confirmation message received. A one-way ticket to Rome. I turned off my phone, slipped it into my purse, and calmly opened the door. The restaurant was still bustling, but I no longer cared. Ethan was still at the table, eyes glued to his phone. A fresh glass of wine sat before him, his colleagues now gone. He hadn't even noticed how long I had been gone, nor did he sense the shift in me. I bent down, took a small wallet from my purse, pulled out a few bills and placed them on the table. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, finally tearing his eyes away from his screen. "I'm leaving," I said calmly, my voice devoid of any anger. Ethan scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Oh, come on, sulking again? Ashley, you know how I am. That was just a joke. You're overreacting." I looked straight at him, and for the first time in years I saw him clearly. No admiration, no desperate search for a reason to forgive, just a simple truth. Ethan had never truly respected me. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "You're right," I nodded slightly. "I've been overreacting for 12 years. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Outside the restaurant, the late-night air carried a soft chill. I pulled my coat closer around me and hailed a taxi to the airport. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse, but I didn't need to check to know who was calling. Ethan wouldn't panic right away. He'd call a few times, send a couple of messages, but then assume I was just sulking and would be back tomorrow. He had no idea that this time I was truly leaving. And there would be no tomorrow for this marriage. The plane touched down on the runway in Rome, bringing me into a world entirely unfamiliar yet full of promise. I took a deep breath, taking in the air. It was warmer than I expected, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and a light breeze carrying the scent of ancient cobblestone streets. I had no plans, no one waiting for me, no idea where to go next. But I was free. The feeling was so foreign that it took me a moment to realize. This was the first time in 12 years that I didn't have to wait for anyone, report to anyone, or fear disappointing anyone. I walked through the airport, pulling my small suitcase behind me, the only thing I had managed to bring in my hurried escape. I found a taxi stand and hesitantly spoke the Italian I had picked up from movies. A small hotel, but not too touristy, a place where real Italians live. The driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, nodded. "I know a place." He drove me through narrow, stone-paved streets, past scooters weaving through traffic, cafes with tiny tables squeezed together, and elegantly dressed people chatting in a language I didn't fully understand, but instantly loved. The car stopped in front of an old building with a cream-colored facade and small windows adorned with flower boxes. A simple sign displayed the name of the hotel, Locanda Fiorella. I stepped into the reception area, where an elderly woman with neatly pinned silver hair stood behind the desk. "Buonasera," she greeted me warmly, her kind eyes studying me. I hesitated, then suddenly remembered something. I didn't want to use the name that had been tied to Ethan, the name I had heard for 12 years as part of a life I no longer wanted. "Ashley Bennett," I said, using my maiden name. She smiled. "Benvenuta, Ashley." She led me to a small but spotless room with a balcony overlooking the street below. When I opened the window, a light breeze drifted in, carrying the laughter of passers-by and the scent of pizza from a nearby trattoria. I sat on the edge of the bed and let out a deep sigh. I had really left. The next morning I woke up late. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to make breakfast for anyone, checking Ethan's schedule, or worrying about whether he was pleased. I went downstairs and stepped into the cafe on the corner. A young waiter with curly hair greeted me with a smile. Un café? Un cornetto, per favore? He nodded and quickly brought over a small espresso and a perfectly crisp croissant. I took a sip, the bold bitterness of the coffee spreading across my tongue, and unexpectedly, I smiled to myself. I used to love strong coffee, but Ethan always complained that it was too intense, so I had spent years drinking watered-down lattes. But this was what I truly liked. I was remembering who I was. That afternoon I wandered through the small streets, running my fingers over the old stone walls, admiring shops selling handmade pasta, and tiny bookstores with Italian novels neatly lined on wooden shelves. I stopped in front of a small restaurant where the scent of garlic and tomatoes drifted from the kitchen. A woman was adjusting a stack of tablecloths by the entrance. She looked up and I froze. Ashley? That voice, that face, it was Natalie, my college friend. The one I had once planned to open a restaurant with. But when Ethan got his first job in New York, I had abandoned that dream to follow him. And Natalie? She had taken her own path. Oh my God, it's really you! Natalie set down the tablecloths and rushed over to hug me tightly. I laughed, feeling as if I had just reunited with a part of my past, a part that Ethan had taken away from me. She pulled me inside the cozy little restaurant, introducing me to the chefs, the servers. What are you doing in Rome? She asked. I took a deep breath, then let my shoulders relax. Starting over. That evening, Natalie invited me to dinner at her restaurant. As the plate of pasta was set before me, I saw the excitement in her eyes as she talked about her work, how she had fought to open this restaurant, the struggles and triumphs she had been through. Do you still love cooking? Natalie asked after we raised our glasses in a toast. I hesitated. When was the last time I had truly cooked a meal with all my heart? I remembered the long nights spent preparing flawless dishes for Ethan's dinner parties. But that had never been about the joy of cooking. I looked down at the food in front of me, then back up at Natalie, nodding slowly. I think I do. Natalie smiled. Then why not start over? That question lingered in my mind even as I walked back to my hotel that night. I had run away from a marriage that had lost its meaning. But maybe I wasn't just running away. Maybe I was finding myself again. I sat at a small cafe on a cobblestone street in Rome, my laptop open in front of me, the screen still blank. I had spent days thinking about Natalie's words. About whether I still had a passion for cooking. The answer, no matter how much I tried to avoid it, had always been clear. I had never stopped loving food. But I had let that passion fade into the background for 12 years. Natalie had suggested I try working in her restaurant, not as a chef, just in the kitchen, no pressure. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just step into the kitchen, feel its rhythm again. Who knows? You might find yourself there. I had agreed, and tonight, I would step into a professional kitchen for the first time in over a decade. I arrived at La Tavola di Sole an hour early to get familiar with everything. The kitchen opened before me, not large but neatly organized, filled with the aroma of garlic and simmering tomatoes. Ashley, Natalie waved me over. Are you ready? I took a deep breath and nodded. I haven't forgotten. She laughed and handed me a crisp white apron. Good. Tonight, you'll prep ingredients. No pressure. But as I stood in front of the cutting board, a sharp knife in my hand, I realized my grip wasn't as steady as it used to be. I looked down at the onion resting on the board and took a deep breath. I reminded myself, the hands remember what the heart never forgets. The first slice, slow. The second. Gradually I found the rhythm. After all these years, I had forgotten how this felt. The steady sound of the knife hitting the board against the soft hum of the gas burners. The scent of fresh herbs rising as I chopped. The quiet satisfaction of a perfectly prepped tray of ingredients. The feeling that I belonged here. Natalie passed by, glancing at my work. Not bad, she grinned, not bad at all. That night, I stood in the corner of the kitchen, watching the dishes I had helped prepare being served. Fresh pasta, seared salmon with orange glaze, Tiramisu dusted with cocoa like an edible masterpiece. I watched as diners took their first bites, closing their eyes to savor the flavors. It had been so long since I had felt this joy, the joy of making people happy through food. As the restaurant quieted down, Natalie pulled me aside and poured me a glass of wine. "How does it feel?" I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip. "Like I'm waking up from a long sleep." Natalie smiled. "Then why don't you write about it?" I looked at her, surprised. "Write? Yes, you were always great at describing flavors. You could write about your journey, about finding your passion again." I had never considered that, but the idea lingered in my mind all night. The next morning I sat at the same cafe, opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen, before placing my fingers on the keyboard. I had forgotten how much I loved cooking. But Rome woke me up. This is my story, the story of a woman who spent 12 years being the wife of a man who didn't deserve her, and is now rediscovering herself in every slice of the knife, every bubbling pot of broth, every crisp bite of pastry. I paused, reread the first lines. Then I kept writing. I named my blog The Runaway Chef. A runaway chef finding herself again. I was sitting in my usual small cafe in Rome, the morning sunlight streaming through the window, casting warm streaks across the table. My laptop was open, but my mind wasn't fully focused on my latest piece for The Runaway Chef. Since starting the blog, I had received hundreds of messages from other women who had also lost themselves in relationships that had dimmed their own light. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. But this morning, a different message had pulled me back to reality. Ethan had found me. A text from Claire, my younger sister, had arrived early this morning. "Sis, Ethan just showed up at Mom and Dad's. He was furious when he found out you withdrew from the joint account and used his card. He's been talking to a lawyer, be careful." I gripped my phone tightly. I had known this day would come, but I hadn't expected it to be this soon. I looked up and met Natalie's gaze from behind the cafe counter. She frowned as she studied my expression. "You okay?" she asked, pouring more coffee into my cup. I set my phone down, trying to steady my voice. "Ethan knows I'm here." A flicker of understanding crossed Natalie's face. "Do you think he'll come?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But I have nothing left to say to him." I spent the rest of the day in the kitchen at La Tavola di Solo, the restaurant Natalie managed, keeping myself busy. The rhythm of the kitchen grounded me, the steady chopping of knives against the cutting board, the sizzle of oil in the pan, the fragrant aroma of garlic and basil. I thought I had pushed Ethan from my mind, until the restaurant started winding down for the night. The door swung open and he walked in. Ethan stood in front of me, dressed in a dark suit, looking just as he always had, but there was something in his eyes that made me immediately wary. "Ashley," he said, and just that one word sent a chill down my spine. Natalie stepped up beside me, her eyes sharp with concern. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, nodded, and faced Ethan. "What are you doing here?" My voice was unsettlingly calm. Ethan smiled, but it wasn't warm. "I came to bring you home." I crossed my arms. "I don't have a home there anymore." His smile faded slightly as he pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, as if this were just a normal conversation between husband and wife. "Ashley, I know you're going through a difficult phase. You left so suddenly, used my card, ran off to Italy like some kind of impulsive midlife crisis, but you need to come back to reality. We can fix this." I stared at him, feeling a slow, simmering anger rise inside me. "We? Even what you want to fix isn't our marriage, it's your reputation." He didn't deny it right away, his eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? You disappeared without a word, making it look like I was some terrible husband. You humiliated me in front of my friends, my family, my colleagues." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You care more about what people think than what you've done to me for the past 12 years? Ethan leaned in, his voice dropping. "Do you really think you can start over without me? No one knows you here, Ashley. No one cares about a nameless prep cook in a tiny restaurant in Rome. This life isn't for you. You don't belong here." I held his gaze, then slowly reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Ethan frowned, picking it up and flipping through the pages. Email, job offers I had never seen, opportunities I never knew I had, a rejection sent in my name, without my knowledge. "This is what you did," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You turned down opportunities for me. You decided the course of my life without telling me. You destroyed my career, Ethan, but I won't let you do it again. His expression hardened as he flipped through the pages, realizing that I knew everything. His eyes darkened as he looked up. You went behind my back and dug this up? I gave him a cold smile. I didn't have to. The truth found its way to me. His grip tightened on the folder, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. So this is your choice? To ruin our marriage because you think I was unfair to you? I slowly stood up, looking at him one last time. No, Ethan, you ruined it a long time ago. I'm just cleaning up what's left. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That night, I sent an email to my lawyer. The divorce papers would be sent to Ethan next week. I placed my espresso cup down, scrolling through a new email on my laptop. It was from Il Gusto, one of Italy's top food magazines. We're very impressed with your writing on The Runaway Chef. If you're interested, we'd love to offer you a 3-month contract to write about your culinary experiences in Rome, incorporating original recipes. I froze, staring at the screen. 3 months ago, I had been trapped in a controlling marriage, completely disconnected from the dreams and passions I once had. And now I was receiving a job offer from one of Italy's most prestigious food magazines. I didn't need to think twice. I'd love to collaborate, looking forward to discussing the upcoming articles. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair, gazing out the cafe window. A soft breeze carried the scent of freshly baked bread from a nearby bakery, mingling with the quiet hum of locals chatting in Italian. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace. I had started over. And this time, I was in control of my own story. That evening, I celebrated the good news with Natalie and a few new friends from the culinary world. The small gathering took place right at La Tavola di Sole, the place where I had found myself again in the kitchen. Cheers to Ashley, Rome's newest food journalist. Natalie raised her glass, a proud smile on her face. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. I'm still not used to that title. But you deserve it, a voice chimed in from across the table. Luca, a talented young chef I had met while working at the restaurant, looked at me with sincerity in his eyes. You have a way of writing that makes people taste the flavors through your words. Not everyone can do that. I smiled softly. I had once thought I had lost the ability to truly experience food with all my senses. But I hadn't. It had always been there, just waiting for me to awaken it. That night I went home with a light heart. I had found a piece of myself again, but this journey was only beginning. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. I spent my days exploring hidden trattorias tucked away in quiet alleyways, talking to local chefs, jotting down traditional recipes and the stories behind each dish. My blog, The Runaway Chef, was gaining traction. My articles were being widely shared, and then, an unexpected email arrived. From Alessandro Rossi, one of Italy's most renowned food critics. I truly enjoy the way you write about flavors and dining experiences. If you're available, I'd like to invite you to an exclusive gathering of critics and chefs next week. This could be a great opportunity to expand your network in the culinary world. I reread the email, making sure I wasn't imagining it. Alessandro Rossi was a big name. An invitation from him could open countless doors. I clicked reply without hesitation. It would be an honor. Thank you for taking the time to read my work. I look forward to meeting you next week. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. 3 months ago, Ethan told me I couldn't succeed without him. Now, I was building a career he never believed I was capable of. The event was held at an upscale restaurant attended by some of the most respected chefs and critics in the industry. I felt a flicker of nervousness, but as I stepped inside, I reminded myself, I was here because of my own work, my own merit. Alessandro Rossi was a distinguished man in his 50s, exuding confidence without arrogance. When I approached, he greeted me with a warm smile. Ashley Bennett, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been following your blog. You have a rare talent. I shook his hand, steadying my voice. Thank you, I truly appreciate that. He nodded thoughtfully, then studied me for a moment. I'd like to propose something. I tilted my head slightly, waiting. Our magazine is looking for a writer specializing in international cuisine. If you're interested, I can introduce you to the editorial team. A long-term contract, not just 3 months like Il Gusto. For a moment, my heart stopped. A long-term contract? I had come to Rome with nothing but a suitcase and no plans. Now I had a new career, a community that valued me, and an opportunity I never imagined would come my way. I smiled, feeling a certainty settle in my chest. I'm very interested. Tell me what the next steps are. That night I returned home, sat at my small desk by the window and opened my laptop to write a new post for the runaway chef. 3 months ago I thought I had lost everything, but sometimes we have to lose something to find ourselves again. I found what I thought I had lost forever: passion, freedom, and a life I truly want to live. I hit publish and gazed out at the Rome's skyline, the streetlights casting golden reflections on the cobblestone streets below. I was no longer the woman waiting in the shadows. Now I was Ashley Bennett, a woman in control of her own life. My phone buzzed just as I was setting the table. I wiped my hands on my apron, picked it up and glanced at the screen. Ethan. After 6 months of silence he had reappeared. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what it would say. A belated apology. A casual question. Or maybe one last attempt to pull me back. But none of it mattered anymore. I swiped left. Pressed delete. No hesitation. No regret. I set my phone back on the kitchen counter, took a deep breath and turned back to the softly simmering pot of sauce on the stove. Tonight was special, and I wouldn't let anything ruin it. My small apartment in Rome glowed under the warm light, filled with the rich aroma of sautéed garlic and ripe tomatoes. I had spent the afternoon preparing this dinner, a celebration for the family I had chosen for myself. I adjusted the tablecloth, arranged the white ceramic plates, and poured wine into delicate glass goblets. These little details, these simple moments. Once they were things I had never dared to dream of when I was Ethan's wife. Back then my life revolved around him, his parties, his guests, the people he wanted me to impress. But tonight I was living my life. The doorbell rang and I smiled as I opened it. Natalie was the first to step in, holding a bottle of Italian wine and wearing a radiant smile. "You've really become an Italian chef now, haven't you?" she teased, inhaling the delicious scent filling my apartment. "Not quite," I grinned, "but I have found myself again through every dish I cook." Luca and Alessandro arrived next, carrying a fresh loaf of bread from the famous bakery down the street. "Ashley, you should open a restaurant," Alessandro said, glancing around my kitchen, filled with carefully chosen ingredients and well-used cookware. I laughed. "No, I still love writing too much." "Then a cookbook?" Luca suggested. I paused, considering the idea. A cookbook filled with stories of my journey, recipes I had learned along the way. Maybe that was the next step. Dinner unfolded in waves of laughter, stories shared between bites of food, glasses raised in celebration. I looked around the table at the people who valued me. Not because I was someone's wife, not because I met someone's expectations, but simply because I was me. Once, I had measured my worth by how well I pleased Ethan. I had waited for his approval, his acknowledgement. But I didn't need that anymore. I had found my own worth. As the night wound down and my friends said their goodbyes, I lingered by the window, gazing down at the lively streets of Rome. I had come so far. From a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. From someone who had abandoned her dreams to please someone else. From someone who had spent years waiting in the background, letting others decide her fate. Now, I was Ashley Bennett. A woman who was free. A woman who knew she deserved better. I poured myself one last glass of wine, gently clinking it against the air in a silent toast to myself. This isn't the end, this is the beginning. Life isn't a series of predetermined events. It's made up of the choices we create for ourselves. Ashley's story isn't just about leaving a failed marriage. It's about reclaiming her identity, something many of us may lose when we put others before ourselves for too long. Freedom doesn't come from running away. It comes from facing our truth and choosing to change. In the end, true happiness isn't found in someone else's validation, it's found in the choices we make for our own lives. What do you think about Ashley's journey? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between staying or walking away to find yourself? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow for more inspiring stories about life, family, and the journey to happiness.